Thomas Müller was never supposed to become one of football's greatest players. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the strongest. And he certainly wasn't the most glamorous footballer of his generation. Yet somehow, he would go on to win everything the game had to offer. League titles, Champions Leagues, a World Cup, and become one of Bayern Munich's greatest ever players. But none of it looked likely when a quiet teenager from Bavaria worked his way through Bayern Munich's academy. Unlike many future superstars, Müller wasn't surrounded by hype. There were no headlines calling him the next big thing. No enormous transfer fee. No expectations that he would become the face of one of football's biggest clubs. Everything changed in 2008, when a new manager arrived in Munich. Louis van Gaal looked at the young forward and saw something almost everyone else had missed. While others focused on what Thomas Müller couldn't do, Van Gaal focused on what he could. It would prove to be one of the greatest decisions in Bayern Munich's history. Thomas Müller's breakthrough was immediate. Under Louis van Gaal, the young German became a regular in Bayern Munich's first team. And almost instantly, people noticed something unusual. He didn't play like anyone else. He wasn't the quickest player on the pitch. He rarely beat defenders with dazzling tricks. He wasn't a traditional striker. Nor was he a classic attacking midfielder. Trying to define Thomas Müller became almost impossible. So Müller came up with his own description. Raumdeuter. In English, the interpreter of space. While other players chased the ball, Müller chased empty spaces. He had an extraordinary ability to arrive exactly where defenders didn't expect him to be. 1 second he appeared invisible. The next, he was standing completely unmarked with the ball at his feet. It wasn't luck. It was intelligence. Teammates quickly learned that if they could find Müller, something usually happened. A goal, an assist, or the move that created both. His understanding of space was unlike anything football had seen before. He wasn't simply reading the game. He was reading the defenders. As Bayern's confidence grew, so did Müller's influence. Goals began to flow. Trophies followed. And the young player nobody expected to become a superstar was becoming one of the first names on the team sheet. Not because he looked spectacular, but because he made everyone around him better. As Thomas Müller mastered his unique role, the trophies began to follow. Season after season, Bayern Munich dominated German football. Bundesliga titles became almost routine. Domestic cups followed. But Müller wasn't interested in individual headlines. His focus was always the same: winning. What made him so valuable wasn't just the goals he scored, or the assists he created. It was the way he made everyone around him better. Whether playing alongside Arjen Robben, Frank Ribery, Robert Lewandowski, or later Harry Kane, Müller always seemed to know exactly where they would be before they did. His understanding of the game was almost telepathic. Then came 2013, the greatest season in Bayern Munich's history. Under Jupp Heynckes, Bayern won the Bundesliga, the DFB Pokal, and finally, the UEFA Champions League, a historic treble. Müller scored in the Champions League final against Borussia Dortmund and once again proved he always arrived when Bayern needed him most. 7 years later, history repeated itself. Another treble. Another Champions League. Another reminder that while football constantly changed around him, Thomas Müller remained indispensable. Managers came and went. Superstars arrived and departed. Yet Müller was always there, quietly delivering, quietly winning, quietly becoming one of Bayern Munich's greatest ever players. He never needed to be the fastest, or the most skillful, because while others tried to beat defenders, Thomas Müller simply beat the game itself. If Thomas Müller was built for Bayern Munich, he seemed born for the World Cup. In 2010, at just 20 years old, he announced himself to the world. 5 goals, 3 assists, the Golden Boot, the Best Young Player award. Almost overnight, the unknown Bayern forward had become one of football's biggest stars. 4 years later, he returned to Brazil with Germany determined to go one step further. Müller scored the opening goal of the tournament against Portugal. Then came the match nobody will ever forget. Germany, Against Brazil. In Brazil, the hosts expected a historic night. Instead, football witnessed one of its greatest shocks. A 7-1 victory. Müller set the tone with the opening goal inside 11 minutes as Germany dismantled the favorites in front of a stunned world. Days later, Germany lifted the World Cup. For Thomas Müller, it completed another extraordinary chapter. By the age of 24, he had won almost everything football had to offer. A World Cup, multiple Bundesliga titles, the Champions League, and countless individual honors. Not bad. For the player many believed wasn't athletic enough, or talented enough, to reach the very top. He never silenced the critics by changing who he was. He silenced them by winning. As the years passed, football continued to change. Managers came and went. Teammates retired. New superstars arrived. But one player always remained. Thomas Müller. Season after season, he continued to prove that intelligence could be just as powerful as pace, that movement could be more dangerous than skill, and that football isn't always won by the strongest player, but by the smartest. By the time he left the Allianz Arena, Müller had become one of the most decorated footballers in history. More than 700 appearances for Bayern Munich, countless Bundesliga titles, multiple DFB Pokals, 2 Champions League crowns, a World Cup, and a legacy few players will ever match. Yet perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't measured in medals. It was changing how people looked at football. Thomas Müller proved you didn't need to fit the mold. You didn't have to be the quickest or the flashiest. You simply had to understand the game better than everyone else. For over 15 years, opponents knew exactly what Thomas Müller wanted to do. The incredible part was that almost nobody could stop him doing it. Because while football searched for another player like Müller, it never found one. He wasn't the next anyone. He wasn't compared to a legend. He became something much rarer. A player so unique that football had to invent a new word just to describe him. Raumdeuter, the interpreter of space. And perhaps there will never be another quite like him.